I was standing at the door of his office at 2:15 in the afternoon of a rainy Wednesday in March, with my heart racing and my hands shaking, holding the lunchbox that I had prepared with so much care that morning, when I saw that woman leaving his office wearing a tight red dress that defined every curve of her body, black high heels that made an arrogant sound on the marble floor, straight blonde hair falling perfectly over her shoulders, impeccable makeup of someone who had time and money to take care of herself, and the worst, the absolutely devastating, was the smile of satisfaction on her lips as she walked past me without paying me the slightest attention, as if I were invisible, as if I didn't exist, and then she stopped at the reception, picked up the expensive bag that was on the counter, a designer bag that I recognized because I had seen it in magazines and cost at least 8,000 reais, turned around and shouted into the room without any shame, loud enough for all the employees to hear, "Honey, don't forget that tonight is at the Italian restaurant at 8 o'clock. Already I booked our favorite table." And my world collapsed in that exact second, because that word, love, that damn word that I thought was mine alone, that I used with him every day for 26 years of marriage, was coming out of the mouth of a stranger with the naturalness of someone who had the right, of someone who had intimacy, of someone who had possession. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I'm 59 years old. I live in Miami, Florida. And at that moment, I felt my entire body go cold. Despite the 28-degree temperature outside, my legs went soft, and I had to lean on the doorframe to keep from falling. The lunchbox slipped out of my hand and fell to the floor with a dry noise. The tomato sauce that I had made so carefully since 6 in the morning spread across the floor like blood. And it was at that moment that Ricardo, my husband, the man that I had loved since I was 21, appeared at the door of his office with his light blue dress shirt half unbuttoned, his hair messed up in a way that I knew very well because that was the way it looked after being touched. And the expression on his face when he saw me standing there wasn't one of guilt, it wasn't regret, it wasn't even surprise. It was pure annoyance, as if I were an inconvenient problem that he would have to solve. Before continuing, if you have ever experienced betrayal like this, so cruel and blatant, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this story goes far, and the revenge will be proportional to the amount of pain I felt that day. Comment from which city you're watching, because I need to know that I'm not alone in this, that other women were also treated like disposable trash after giving the best years of their lives to men who didn't deserve even a second of our attention. The receptionist, a young girl of about 25 called Sophia, who was always nice to me, looked at the floor mortified, her cheeks red with embarrassment, and I realized at that moment that she knew, that everyone there knew, that I was the only idiot who had no idea what was going on under my nose. Ricardo took 2 steps towards me and said in that controlled voice he used when he was angry but tried to appear calm, "Elena, what are you doing here?" I said I was going out for lunch today, and the coldness in that sentence, the total absence of affection or explanation, cut me deeper than any scream could have. I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a broken whisper. "Who is she?" He sighed, ran his hand through his hair in that gesture of impatience I knew so well, and replied, "This is neither the time nor the place for this conversation, Elena. Go home." And in that moment, something inside me, something that still believed that I deserved respect, that I deserved dignity, screamed louder than the pain. "No, you owe me an explanation now. Who is that woman who just left here calling me love in front of everyone?" Ricardo looked around, saw that the 3 employees who were in the office at that moment had stopped pretending to work and were clearly paying attention to the scene, and this irritated him even more. He grabbed me by the arm tightly with that same hand that had once tenderly caressed my face and pulled me into his room, closing the door with a bang that echoed like a gunshot. Inside that room that I knew so well because I had helped decorate it 6 years ago, when he finally managed to rent his own commercial space for his accounting office, between the beige walls that I painted, the gray curtains that I chose, and the stupid motivational painting that I gave him as a gift for his birthday, Ricardo released me with a push and said the words that would mark the end of everything I believed in. "His name is Van. This one. She's been my partner for 2 years, and yes, we've been together for 1.5 years. I didn't plan for you to find out like this, but since you did, then that's it. Now you know. 1.5 years. 546 days of lies, while I woke up every single day at 5 in the morning to make his coffee the way he liked it, strong Colombian coffee with 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and a splash of hot milk, while I ironed his dress shirts with such care as to not leave any iron marks, while I prepared his meals, thinking about his health because he had high cholesterol and I always worried about every detail of his life. 546 days where I went to bed next to him every night, believing that this man was my companion, my partner, the person who had promised before God and 72 witnesses on our wedding day that he would be faithful until death do us part. And he was there in front of me, telling me that with the same naturalness as someone commenting on the weather, without any weight in his voice, without any remorse in the brown eyes that I thought I knew, but that at that moment were looking at me as if I were an inconvenient stranger. I felt my legs give way again, and I sat down heavily on the black leather chair that sat in front of his desk, the same chair where I sat when I went to visit him at lunch in the early years, when there was still romance, when there was still complicity, when he still looked at me as if I were important. My hands were shaking so much that I had to cross my fingers in my lap to try to control it. My breathing was irregular, short and painful, as if someone was squeezing my chest with both hands, and tears began to fall without me being able to stop them, staining the navy blue blouse that I had chosen that morning, thinking it was his favorite blouse, still thinking about pleasing him, about being beautiful for him, even at 59 years old, with a body that was no longer the same as when we met, but that I tried to maintain at its best possible. "How could you?" was all I could say between sobs. "How could you do this to me?" Ricardo sat on the edge of the table, crossed his arms over his chest, and replied with cruel calm, "Elena, you and I have known that our marriage has been dead for years. We are just 2 people living in the same house for convenience. There is nothing left between us." Every word was a stab. Each syllable was pure poison entering my veins. And the sickest part was that he was saying it as if it were obvious, as if it were the absolute truth, as if I also knew and agreed, when in reality I still loved that man with every fiber of my being, still planned our future together, still dreamed of the trip to Spain we wanted to take when he finally retired in 5 years, still saw meaning in every day because he was at the center of my life. "Dead?" I repeated, my voice now firmer even through the tears. "Our marriage is dead for you, Ricardo. For me, it was alive. For me, every day by your side had meaning. To me, you were still everything." He rolled his damn eyes as if my love for him was something boring, something exaggerated, something pathetic, and said, "That's exactly the problem, Elena. You suffocate me. You control me. You turned our relationship into a prison where I can't breathe. Vanessa understands me. She gives me space. She is independent. She has her own life, and she doesn't depend on me to feel complete." And in that moment, I saw everything with brutal clarity. I saw that everything I did out of love, every gesture of care, every show of affection, every attempt to be close to him, he interpreted as imprisonment, as suffocation, as weakness. I was being punished for loving too much, while he rewarded himself for not loving enough. "What about the house?" I asked, because suddenly my brain was trying to understand the extent of the betrayal, trying to calculate the size of the hole I had fallen into. "The house we paid for together for 23 years? The savings? The plans?" Ricardo straightened his posture and replied with surgical coldness, "We're going to have to share everything, obviously. I'm going to file for divorce this week. My lawyer is already preparing the papers. You will get your share, Elena. I won't leave you helpless. But our marriage is over, and you need to accept that and move on. Move on." As if 26 years could be filed away in a box and forgotten in a corner. As if the entire story we built together was just a disposable draft. As if I could just wake up the next day and be someone else. Someone who didn't love Ricardo Morales. Who hadn't dedicated every second of my youth and middle age to building a life with him. I stood up from that chair with difficulty. My legs felt like they were made of lead. My entire body ached as if I had been physically beaten, because in a way I had been. And I looked at him for the last time that day, trying to find some trace of the man I met 38 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party, the 25-year-old with the easy smile and bright eyes who asked me to dance and then took me to eat tacos at a food truck at 11 at night, the man who proposed to me a year later on one knee on the beach during sunset, with a simple ring that cost $300 but was worth more to me than all the diamonds in the world. But I found nothing of that man. The man in front of me was a stranger with Ricardo's face, and that realization was almost worse than the betrayal itself. I left that room in silence. I crossed the office with my head high, even though I felt the pitying looks of the employees burning my skin. I got to my car, a 2019 silver Honda Civic that had 120,000 kilometers on it. I got in, closed the door, and it was only then, in the privacy of that small, stuffy space with the smell of cherry air freshener, that I completely collapsed. I cried like I hadn't cried since the day my mother died 15 years ago. A deep, guttural cry that came from a place so deep inside me that I didn't even know it existed. A cry that made my whole body shake and left me breathless. And I stood there in that parking lot for an hour and 40 minutes until there were no more tears, just a huge, frightening emptiness. I drove home on autopilot. I don't remember any street, no traffic lights, no car. I just know that I arrived because suddenly I was parked in the garage of our house, a 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood that we bought 23 years ago for $180,000, and which today was worth approximately $450,000, according to the last appraisal we did 6 months ago. I walked through the kitchen door, and the silence in the empty house was deafening. I looked around at the wooden dining table we bought at a sale 12 years ago, at the beige sofa in the living room that we chose together 8 years ago, at the framed photographs on the walls showing our life in frozen chunks of time, wedding in my flowy white dress that my aunt sewed for 2 months, 15th and 25th wedding anniversaries, vacations in Orlando visiting the parks with our son Miguel when he was still a child, graduation photos of Miguel from college 3 years, ego with Ricardo at my side, smiling proudly. That place I called home suddenly felt like a museum of a life that never really existed, at least not for Ricardo. I went to the bedroom, our bedroom. I opened his closet and started looking. I didn't know exactly what, but I knew there had to be more. There had to be proof. There had to be evidence of this parallel life he had been living while I was stupid enough to believe we were happy, and I found it. In the inside pocket of a dark gray suit that he rarely wore, I found 2 movie tickets from last month for a movie I had said I wanted to see, but he claimed he was too busy. I found a receipt for a dinner at a very expensive French restaurant that cost $620 on a date he said he had a late client meeting with. I found an empty dark blue velvet box that had clearly contained a piece of jewelry, and inside the trouser pocket of a black suit, I found a handwritten note in delicate feminine handwriting that it said, "Babe, last night was perfect. I can't wait for when we are finally free to live our lives together without any more lies. I love you infinitely. V." I sat on the closet floor, still holding that note that smelled like expensive, sweet perfume. A perfume that was definitely not mine because I had been wearing the same discreet floral fragrance for 15 years, and the reality of what was happening finally fully sank into my consciousness. It wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't just an adventure. It was a parallel relationship complete with plans for the future, with declarations of love, with promises of a life together as soon as he got rid of me, as soon as I was officially discarded like an old piece of furniture that no longer serves any purpose. They were waiting for the right moment, planning strategically, and I was so stupid that I didn't notice anything at all. I started to replay the last 18 months in my head with this new lens of knowledge, and the signs were all there, screaming, too obvious. The times he came home and went straight to take a shower before even greeting me. The work meetings that multiplied. They were absurdly constant at night or on weekends. The cell phone that he started carrying everywhere, including to the bathroom when before he left it lying everywhere. The messages that arrived, and he read with a half-smile before quickly deleting it. The business trips that increased since his office was local, and he had never needed to travel so much before. The drastic decrease in the frequency of intimate relationships between us, to the point where in the last 4 months, he didn't even touch me. The times I suggested we go out together, and he always had an excuse ready. And the worst of all, the absolutely most humiliating, was remembering the times when I questioned if everything was okay, and he turned the tables, making me feel paranoid, insecure, suffocating, exactly the words he used today. He had psychologically manipulated me into questioning my own perception of reality while building an entire life with another woman. I didn't sleep that night. Ricardo arrived home at 11:30, went into the bedroom, grabbed some pajamas, and went to sleep in the guest room without saying a word. as if I were the intruder in my own home. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the night sounds of the house, the low hum of the air conditioning, the ticking of the clock on the wall, my own heart beating irregularly in my chest, and I tried to understand how I had gotten to that point. I tried to pinpoint the exact moment I stopped being loved, the precise second he looked at me and decided I was no longer enough. Had it been when my body changed after menopause 6 years ago? When I gained 12 kilos that I couldn't lose despite trying 3 different diets? When did the wrinkles around my eyes become deeper and more visible? When did my hair start to turn gray and I had to start dyeing it every 3 weeks to maintain the dark brown color? Or had it been something deeper, some character flaw, some fundamental inadequacy that made me expendable after so many years of service? Because that was what I was to him now, I realized with painful clarity. A service provider whose usefulness had expired, being replaced by a newer, more attractive, more independent model. I cried again, silently this time, the tears falling from the corners of my eyes and wetting the pillow, and at some point around 4:20 in the morning, I finally fell into a restless sleep full of nightmares, where I was always running after Ricardo, but he was always moving away, always out of my reach, always with that woman in the red dress laughing in my face. I woke up at 7 in the morning out of pure habit, even though I had slept less than 3 hours. My body was sore, as if I had been run over. My eyes were swollen and red. My head was throbbing with a brutal migraine. I went to the kitchen to prepare coffee on automatic, but my hands were shaking so much that I spilled the beans on the floor. I fell to my knees to clean up the mess, and it was in that position, on all fours on the kitchen floor picking up coffee beans, that I realized how low I had come. I was 59 years old. I had dedicated the last 26 years of my life to a man who now saw me as a nuisance. I didn't have a career of my own because I had left my job as an administrative assistant 22 years ago when Miguel was born, and Ricardo insisted that it would be better for me to stay at home and take care of the baby in the house. I didn't have a university degree because I got pregnant at 23 and left teaching school in the second year to get married and never went back. My personal savings amounted to a shameful $8,400 in a savings account that I managed with difficulty by taking $50 or $100 here and there from the money that Ricardo gave me monthly for household expenses, and I realized with horror that I was completely financially dependent on a man who no longer wanted me. How had she been so naive? How had I allowed my life to be so vulnerable? My mother, God rest her soul, always said, "Elena, my daughter, never depend completely on a man. Always have your own money, your own independence." And I, passionate and stupid, ignored the advice, thinking that love and commitment were enough, thinking that building a family was enough dedication, thinking that Ricardo would never abandon me. I paid dearly for my innocence. I spent that entire Thursday in bed, unable to function. I didn't eat anything. I just drank water when my thirst became unbearable. Ricardo left for work at 8:30 in the morning, without stopping by my room to say goodbye, without asking if I was okay, without showing the slightest concern or remorse. I heard his car leaving the garage and disappearing down the street, probably straight into her arms, into Vanessa, and the image of the two of them together, laughing in my face, living the Roma. What should have been mine made me gag. Miguel, our son, called around noon from his apartment in Tampa, where he worked as a software engineer, making $75,000 a year, an intelligent and independent 25-year-old guy who visited us once a month, and asked if everything was okay because I usually called him on Thursday mornings and he found my silence strange. I thought about telling him. I thought about getting it off my chest, but I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't admit out loud that his father, the man he admired so much, had betrayed me and discarded me like trash. So I lied, said I just had a bad cold, that I was resting, that I would call in a few days when I was better. He believed it because I was always good at hiding pain. I was always strong for others, even when I was broken inside. When I hung up the phone, I looked at the phone screen and saw our family photo as wallpaper, taken last Christmas with everyone smiling, and I realized that that image was a lie, that it had probably been a lie for a long time, and I simply refused to see it. On Friday morning, I forced myself to get up, shower, and dress, because I knew that if I stayed in bed, I would rot there forever. My reflection in the bathroom mirror scared me. I looked like I had aged 10 years in 3 days, deep circles under my eyes, pale skin, chapped lips, lifeless hair. Who was that woman? I didn't recognize myself. I went down to the kitchen and found a white envelope on the dining table with my name written on the front in Ricardo's handwriting. Inside was a typed 2-page letter, formal and cold as a business document, explaining that he had already contacted a divorce lawyer, that the name of the firm was Morrison & Associates, located at 3500 Biscayne Avenue, that I should hire my own lawyer, that he was being fair in the division of assets by proposing that we keep 50% each of everything built during the marriage, that the house would be sold and the proceeds split, that the 2 joint bank accounts would be split, half and half currently totaling $132,000, that his retirement plan worth $280,000 would be partially divided according to law, that he committed to paying temporary alimony of $2,500 a month for 5 years until I re-established myself, and that he expected me to be reasonable and cooperative in making the process as painless as possible for both of us, least painful as possible. As if there was some way to make the complete destruction of my life less painful, like there was a gentle way to rip my heart out of my chest. The letter ended with, "I will always respect you as the mother of my son and be grateful for the years we spent together. But the time has come for us both to go our separate ways and seek our individual happiness." Signed, Ricardo. I tore that letter into tiny pieces so small they became pathetic confetti scattered across the table, and something inside me, something that had been sleeping or repressed for decades, finally woke up. It was anger. Pure, crystalline, powerful rage. It wasn't the destructive anger that would make me do something stupid, but rather the productive anger that would make me act, that would make me fight, that would make me prove that I wasn't the weak, disposable woman that Ricardo thought I was. Did he want a reasonable and cooperative divorce? Did he want to go about his life quietly with his lover while I silently disappeared with crumbs? For he didn't know what he was about to face, because the Elena he abandoned was no longer the same docile and compliant Elena he manipulated for years. I took out my cell phone, searched Google for law firms specializing in divorce in Miami, and wrote down 3 names with the best reviews. I called the first one, Martinez Family Law, and got an appointment for that same afternoon at 3:30. Then, I called my only close friend, Carmen Soto, a 62-year-old woman I met in a yoga class 7 years ago and who became my closest confidant, and told her everything. Carmen listened silently as I talked non-stop for 20 minutes, releasing 3 days of accumulated pain, and when I finished, she said just 5 words that changed everything. "You're going to destroy him, Elena." The lawyer who helped me that afternoon was called Dr. Patricia Herrera. She was 47 years old, with short black hair in a professional cut, an impeccable gray suit, dark and intelligent eyes that analyzed every detail as I told my story. His office was on the 12th floor of a modern office building with views of the city, minimalist decor in shades of white and gray, diplomas framed covering an entire wall showing training at Harvard Law School and specializations in family law. She asked me direct and specific questions for an hour and 40 minutes, writing everything down on a tablet, and then leaned back in the leather chair and said, "Mrs. Rodriguez, your husband has made some very stupid strategic mistakes that are going to cost him dearly. First mistake, he admitted to the extramarital relationship openly and in front of witnesses, which in Florida, despite being a no-fault divorce state, can still influence the division of assets considering the duration of the adultery and the expenditure of marital resources on the mistress. Second error, you dedicated 22 years as a housewife sacrificing your career, which entitles you to compensation significantly more than 50% in many cases. Third error, if we can prove that he spent the couple's money on this woman, expensive gifts, dinners, trips, this is considered dissipation of marital assets, and you are entitled to be compensated for that. Fourth error, alimony of only 5 years for a 26-year marriage where you were dependent on him is absolutely ridiculous, and no decent judge would accept. This, you are entitled to a pension for an indefinite period of time, or for at least 15 years. She paused, looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Do you want an amicable divorce, or do you want real justice?" And for the first time in 4 days, I smiled. I want justice. Dr. Herrera outlined a detailed strategy for the next 40 minutes. First action, I would return home and discreetly begin gathering evidence. I would photograph all the important documents that were at home, bank statements, income tax returns from the last 10 years, investment documents, everything. I would create digital copies of everything and send it to a new email that she would create for me specifically for that. Second action. I would start monitoring Ricardo's spending, looking for suspicious credit card purchases, unusual bank transfers, any evidence of money being spent on Vanessa. Third action. She would hire a private investigator named James Sullivan, a former Miami police detective with 32 years of experience who now worked on infidelity cases, to follow Ricardo and document meetings with his mistress, hotels, restaurants, gifts being purchased. Everything that could prove the pattern of behavior and especially how much of the couple's money he was wasting on her. The investigator's cost would be $150 per hour plus expenses, and she estimated that we would need approximately 80 hours of investigation over 6 weeks, totaling around $15,000. Fourth action. She would file an aggressive divorce petition asking for 70% of the marital assets, permanent alimony of $4,000 a month, additional compensation of $50,000 for emotional harm caused by prolonged adultery, and reimbursement of half of all money spent on her mistress in the last 18 months. Fifth action. She would ask for a temporary court order freezing all joint accounts immediately to prevent Ricardo from moving money or hiding assets. Sixth action. She would file a request for an injunction to prevent Ricardo from bringing Vanessa to the marital home or any property of the couple. The cost of her fees would be $15,000 up front plus $350 per hour of work, with a total estimate of between $40,000 and $60,000, depending on how much Ricardo fought. I looked at this sophisticated, competent woman sitting in front of me and thought about my pathetic $8,400 and told the truth. I don't have that money. Not now. She smiled, not a condescending smile, but an understanding one, and replied, "We will ask the judge to order your husband to pay his legal fees, which is common in cases where there is a financial disparity between the spouses. For now, we only need $5,000 to start, and the rest can be paid as we go. Can you get that?" I remembered the savings, did the math in my head, and agreed. I signed the representation contract right there, felt the weight of the pen in my hand, the blue ink forming my name on the paper, and for the first time since Wednesday, I felt like I wasn't completely helpless. I returned home at 6:15 in the afternoon, and Ricardo hadn't arrived yet. He was probably with her celebrating his imminent freedom without imagining the war he was about to face. I locked the door to his office, that small room at the back of the house where he kept important documents, and began to systematically search. I found the folder with the income tax returns of the last 15 years, and I photographed each page with my cell phone. I discovered that our declared net worth was $720,000, much more than I imagined because Ricardo was always secretive about finances, saying that I didn't need to worry about these things, that he took care of everything. I found statements from an investment account in my name that I didn't even know existed with $142,000. I found his life insurance policy worth $500,000, where I was still the primary beneficiary. I found the deed to the house showing that it was in both of their names. I found documents for a piece of land in his name that he inherited from his mother 8 years ago, valued at $110,000. I photographed absolutely everything, more than 200 photos in total, and sent everything to the email that Dr. Herrera had created. Then I went to the bedroom, opened his dresser drawer, and looked for more evidence of his case. I found 3 credit card receipts he had hidden under his socks. One from a jewelry store worth $5,800, dated 2 months ago, for the purchase of a pearl necklace. Another from a boutique hotel in Miami Beach worth $870 for one night, including champagne and room service, dated 3 weeks ago. On a weekend he claimed to be at an accounting conference in Orlando. And a third from an expensive lingerie store worth $740, dated a month ago. I photographed them all and felt a mixture of nausea and satisfaction. Nausea because I was seeing physical proof that my husband was buying expensive, romantic gifts for another woman with our wedding money. And satisfaction because each receipt was another weapon that Dr. Herrera would use to destroy him in court. Ricardo arrived home at 8:40 at night, walked through the garage door with a bag of fast food, because he clearly didn't expect me to cook for him anymore, saw me sitting in the living room watching television pretending to be normal, and seemed relieved that I wasn't making any dramatic scenes. He really thought I would accept everything quietly. He sat in an armchair far from me, ate his burger in silence while looking at his cell phone, probably exchanging messages with her, and then said without looking at me, "I hope you've had time to process everything and understand that this is what's best for both of us. I've already asked the lawyer to send the preliminary papers. The faster we can resolve this, the better." I took a deep breath, kept my voice calm and neutral, and replied, "I hired my own lawyer today. She will review your proposal and contact your lawyer." I saw the surprise on his face. He clearly didn't expect me to act so quickly. He expected me to be paralyzed with pain and shock for weeks while he controlled the narrative. "Lawyer? Elena, that's unnecessary. I'm being fair. There's no need to spend money on lawyers when we can resolve this between us." And there it was, the usual manipulation, the attempt to make me feel like I was being difficult, that I was complicating things, that I should trust him. 26 years of marriage cannot be resolved in one conversation, Ricardo. I need adequate legal representation, and I will get it. He became visibly angry, threw the rest of the food in the trash, and went to the guest room, slamming the door. I smiled alone in the room because for the first time I had set a limit. I had shown that I would not be passive in this process, and that small victory gave me the strength to continue. In the following days, I strictly followed Dr. Herrera's instructions. Investigator James Sullivan began following Ricardo, and within just a week, he had photographs of him going in and out of a fancy apartment in Brickell, where Vanessa apparently lived. A modern luxury building with a doorman and security where apartments cost at least $400,000, and I wondered if Ricardo had helped financially buy the place. James photographed the two of them dining at expensive restaurants 4 times that week, always holding hands, always kissing, always spending exorbitant amounts of money that reached $300 or $400 a night. She photographed Ricardo buying flowers for her at an expensive flower shop where a bouquet cost $120. She photographed the two of them entering the office together in the morning and leaving at night, sometimes Ricardo with his hand on her waist in a possessive and intimate way. Each photo was a stab, but it was also ammunition, and I was accumulating an arsenal. Dr. Herrera filed a divorce petition in the second week and also filed a request to freeze accounts. On the same day, a bailiff arrived at Ricardo's office at 10:15 in the morning and handed over the official papers in front of Vanessa, employees from everyone. Carmen, who found out through the gossip network because the receptionist, Sophia, was the cousin of a friend of hers, told me that Ricardo was livid, his face red with anger and humiliation, and that he immediately called shouting for his lawyer. At 3 o'clock that same day, he came home like a typhoon, burst into the room where I was reading, and began shouting, "Are you crazy? Are you asking for 70%? Permanent alimony? $50,000 in damages? And you froze our accounts? I can't pay the office bills now because of you." I got up from the couch as calmly as possible, looked straight into his eyes without fear because I had nothing left to lose, and I replied in an icy voice that I didn't even recognize as mine. "You cheated on me for a year and a half. You spent money from our marriage on your lover. You planned to discard me like trash after 26 years of dedication, and you really thought I was going to accept your crumbs without a fight? You don't know me, Ricardo. You never met me." He took a step toward me with his finger pointed in my face and growled, "You're going to regret this. I'm going to fight every penny you're asking for. I'm going to prove that you're a parasite who never worked and deserved nothing." And here was the truth finally coming out, what he really thought of me, that the 22 years I spent running the house, raising our son, cooking his meals, washing his clothes, managing every aspect of the household so he could focus on his work. All of that was being a parasite. It wasn't real work. It wasn't worth it. "Get out of my way," he said quietly but firmly. "And the next time you want to talk to me, talk to my lawyer." He stood there for a moment, looking like he was going to say something else, but something in my expression, perhaps the absolute lack of fear or submission he had always expected from me, made him step back. He left slamming the door, and that night he didn't go back to sleep. I later found out from James that he slept at Vanessa's apartment, and that this became routine because he left the house permanently that week, taking only clothes and personal belongings, leaving me alone in that house that suddenly seemed huge and empty, but also finally at peace. The divorce process dragged on for 7 months of intense legal battle where each side presented arguments, evidence, and witnesses. Dr. Herrera was absolutely brutal, She dismantled every argument from Ricardo's lawyer with surgical precision, presented the investigators' photographs showing the pattern of adultery, the receipts proving dissipation of marital assets, brought in witnesses including Carmen and 3 other friends who testified about my dedication to marriage and family, hired a financial expert who calculated that Ricardo spent approximately $48,000 on Vanessa over the course of 18 months using marital funds, and brilliantly argued that I deserved generous compensation for having sacrificed my career and financial potential to support his career. Ricardo's lawyer, an arrogant man in his early 50s named Charles Morrison, tried to paint him as the victim of a dead marriage and paint me as a vindictive, greedy woman who did not contribute financially to the estate. But Dr. Herrera destroyed this narrative by bringing in experts who calculated the monetary value of the domestic work I performed for 22 years, including housekeeping, meal preparation, laundry, household management, child rearing, emotional support, social secretary, household financial administrator, totaling an estimated value of $1,400,000 if all this work had been paid at market wages. She argued that I was effectively an equal partner in building that wealth, because without my unpaid work, Ricardo would never have had the freedom and time needed to build his successful business. The final hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday in October, 10 months after that horrible day in Ricardo's office. I sat in the courtroom with Dr. Herrera next to me, wearing a discreet but elegant navy blue suit that Carmen helped me choose. Hair combed and tied into a professional bun, light but impeccable makeup, an air of seriousness and dignity. On the other side of the room was Ricardo with his lawyer, and next to him, absurdly, was Vanessa, that woman who destroyed my marriage, sitting there as if she had any right to be present at the dismantling of my life. Miguel had come from Tampa to support me. Sitting behind me was my 26-year-old son who cried when I finally told him everything 3 months ago, who was furious with his father, who temporarily broke ties with him because he couldn't. I was going to accept what Ricardo had done to me. Miguel's presence there gave me strength. The judge was a man of about 65 called the Honorable Thomas Henderson, with gray hair, reading glasses hanging around his neck, and the serious, tired expression of someone who has seen too many family tragedies. He listened to the closing arguments from both sides for 2.5 hours, asked Ricardo some direct and difficult questions that made him stutter and visibly sweat, especially when he asked about the $48,000 spent on his mistress, and Ricardo tried to minimize it by saying that they were exaggerated amounts, and the judge simply raised his eyebrow and said that there were documented receipts, dated photographs, and bank statements proving every penny. After reviewing all the documents in silence for 20 minutes that felt like 2 hours, Judge Henderson took off his glasses, sighed heavily, and began reading his decision. The house would be sold and the proceeds divided, but I would keep 65% due to the years of unpaid dedication and the fact that the adultery had caused the dissolution of the marriage, which meant approximately $290,000 for me versus $160,000 for him. The joint bank accounts totaling $132,000 would be divided equally, 65% for me, $85,800 versus $46,200 for him. The investment account in my name, worth $142,000, would remain entirely with me because it was in my individual name. From his retirement fund worth $280,000, I would receive $120,000, which would be transferred to a QDRO account in my name. The land inherited from him would remain entirely with him because it was an inheritance prior to marriage and was not subject to division. Permanent alimony of $3,500 a month until my death or remarriage, because the judge considered that after 22 years as a housewife, I was not realistically able to build a career that would adequately support me in the same quality of life that I had during the marriage. Reimbursement of $24,000, half of the $48,000 that Ricardo spent on Vanessa, as compensation for the dissipation of marital assets. And finally, legal fees worth $52,000 that Ricardo would have to pay directly to Dr. Herrera's office. When the judge finished reading, he banged his gavel and said, "This marriage is dissolved. The parties are free to pursue their separate lives. Good luck to them both." Ricardo was white, in visible shock, because he had lost much more than he expected. He had lost approximately $430,000 in total between divided assets, lifetime pension, reimbursement, and legal fees. Vanessa beside him looked equally shocked because she was probably just now realizing how much money her new relationship had cost. I left that courtroom with Miguel by my side, Dr. Herrera smiling, satisfied with the overwhelming victory, and for the first time in almost a year, I felt something like relief. It wasn't happiness yet. It wasn't a complete cure, but it was justice. It was validation that my life and my dedication had value. It was confirmation that I wasn't crazy or paranoid or greedy. I was simply a woman who had been terribly wronged and who fought for what was right. Carmen organized a small celebratory dinner that night at a cozy Italian restaurant. Just her, Miguel, Dr. Herrera, and me, and we ate pasta and drank red wine and laughed for the first time in months. Really laughed without bitterness, and I felt the first threads of a new life beginning to weave around me. Miguel, my beautiful son with brown eyes and a gentle smile, who took after my temper and not his selfish father's, hugged me tightly at the end of the night and said, "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You fought and won. You proved that you are too strong to be destroyed by anyone." And those words coming from him, from the human being I loved most in the entire world, were worth more than all the dollars I had won in court. If you've been following this story so far, leave a like because you need to see what happens now. Comment which country you are watching from. And if you've ever felt discarded by those who should love you, know that this twist is for all of us. The house went up for sale 3 weeks after the court ruling and sold in 42 days for $465,000 to a young family with 2 young children who were enchanted by the garden that I had so lovingly tended all those years. On moving day, I walked through each empty room saying goodbye silently, not to the house, but yes to the woman I was in there, to the naive Elena who believed in happy endings and eternal love. And when I closed the door for the last time, I felt like I was closing an entire chapter of my life. With the money from the sale of the house, plus the split bills, plus the investments, plus the transferred retirement fund, I had a net total of $637,800, an amount that made me financially comfortable for the first time in my life, on my own merit, not dependent on any man. I bought a small but beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment in Coral Gables, a charming and safe neighborhood, 85 square meters on the 3rd floor of a boutique building with just 12 units, with a balcony that overlooked a small flowering tree for $290,000 up front. I spent $30,000 on a complete renovation, choosing every color, every piece of furniture, every detail by myself, thinking only about what I liked, not what a husband would approve of. Painting the walls soft yellow in the living room, because I always loved yellow, but Ricardo said it was a crazy color, buying an aqua green velvet sofa because it made me happy just looking at it, filling the shelves with books that I would finally have time to read, transforming that space into a truly home of my own. I invested $400,000 in a conservative combination of index funds and government bonds that yielded me approximately $2,200 a month, which added to the $3,500 in child support, gave me a total income of $5,700 a month, more than enough to live comfortably without luxuries, but with dignity and security. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to ask anyone for money. I didn't have to justify expenses. I didn't have to feel guilty about buying a dress or a book. The financial freedom was intoxicating. I started therapy with a wonderful psychologist called Dr. Lisa Chen, a woman in her early 40s who helped me process not just the betrayal, but all the years of emotional manipulation that I didn't even realize I was suffering from, the patterns of subtle control that Ricardo exerted, the way he gradually undermined my self-esteem by making me doubt my perceptions and feelings. It was painful months of peeling back layers of conditioning and psychological abuse, but necessary for me to understand that it wasn't my fault, that there was nothing wrong with me, that I was always enough, and he was the one who was incapable of appreciating what he had. I signed up for watercolor classes at a community studio because as a teenager I loved drawing, but I abandoned it when I got married because Ricardo thought it was a waste of time. And I discovered that I still had the skills, that I could still create beautiful things. And selling 3 small paintings at a local exhibition for $300 each gave me a satisfaction that no compliment from Ricardo had ever given me. I joined a women's reading club at the neighborhood library and made new friends. Gloria, 63 years old, retired teacher, witty and wise. Beth, 57, divorced nurse who understood exactly what I went through. Jennifer, 61 years old, happy widow who taught me that life doesn't end after 60. And Rosa, 65 years old, a Colombian immigrant who made me laugh with her absurd stories and reminded me that resilience was in my Latin blood. Miguel visited me every weekend now. The relationship between us became even stronger after everything. And he brought his girlfriend, a beautiful 24-year-old girl named Ashley, who worked as a graphic designer, and it was comforting to see my son in a healthy relationship based on mutual respect, so different from the example his father set. They stayed in the guest room that I decorated especially for these visits, and we cooked together on Sundays, using recipes from my mother and grandmother. And that small but functional kitchen was filled with laughter and the smell of good food and real love. 6 months after moving into the apartment, I found a part-time job as an administrative assistant at a veterinary clinic 10 blocks from my house, working 25 hours a week, earning $1,200 a month. And that money earned through my own work, even though it was modest, gave me immense pride. My boss, Dr. Andrew Miller, a kind, divorced 51-year-old veterinarian, treated me with genuine respect, valued my work, thanked me constantly, and this experience of being seen and valued professionally, even in a simple role, healed something inside me that Ricardo had broken by making me feel like I had nothing of value to offer the world. I returned to the Catholic church I attended before getting married, but had gradually abandoned over the years because Ricardo I was an atheist and mocked my faith. And finding that spiritual community again, sitting on those wooden benches every Sunday at 10 in the morning, praying the rosary with other ladies after Mass, brought me a peace that I didn't even remember it was possible to feel. News about Ricardo occasionally arrived through mutual acquaintances, and none of them caused me pain, just indifference. He and Vanessa were living together in her apartment in Brickell, but the relationship was troubled because the financial reality had changed drastically. He was no longer the successful and generous man who could afford expensive dinners and $5,000 gifts. He was now a man who paid $3,500 in pensions monthly and had lost almost half of his assets. His accounting firm was struggling because some clients ended their contracts when they heard about the divorce scandal, because in small communities, reputation matters, and he had become the accountant who abandoned his devoted wife for a younger woman. Not exactly good publicity. Vanessa, it turned out, was 34, 25 years younger than him, and was realizing that a 59-year-old man with emotional baggage, financial obligations, and a suing ex-wife wasn't as romantic as he seemed when it was all secret fling and adrenaline. Carmen told me that she saw them arguing in public in a supermarket, that Vanessa was pregnant and was pressuring Ricardo to get married, but he was hesitant because he had not yet recovered financially or emotionally from the previous divorce. I felt a pang of something when I heard this. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't envy. Maybe it was just the melancholy realization that Ricardo was going to have another child at 60 with a woman he barely knew, while the son we raised together barely spoke to him. But that pang only lasted seconds before I just didn't care anymore. A year and a half after that horrible afternoon in his office, on a sunny Saturday morning in September, I was on the balcony of my apartment, drinking strong Cuban coffee and reading a novel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez when my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number from Miami. I answered, and the voice on the other end was Ricardo's, but different, without the usual arrogance, sounding tired and small. "Elena, it's me. Please don't hang up." I remained silent, waiting. "I know I have no right to call you, that you hate me and have every reason to, but I needed to tell you some things. I screwed up. I destroyed the best thing I had in life, and I didn't realize it until it was too late. Vanessa broke up with me last week, said I'm emotionally unavailable and that she doesn't want to raise a child with a bitter man. She's right. I'm alone now, and for the first time in years, I'm having to really look at myself, and I don't like what I see. I treated you horrivelmente. Joguei fora 26 anos como se não significassem nada. Você me deu sua juventude, criou nosso filho, cuidou de mim, me apoiou, e eu te paguei com traição e crueldade. Não estou ligando para pedir perdão porque sei que não mereço. Não estou ligando para pedir que volte porque sei que isso jamais vai acontecer. Estou ligando apenas para dizer que sinto muito, profundamente, sinceramente, dolorosamente arrependido, e para dizer que você estava certa sobre tudo. Eu não te conhecia. Nunca te valorizei. And now that I've lost you, I've lost Vanessa, I'm losing Miguel, and I'm here alone paying $3,500 a month remembering you, I finally understand what I threw away. I listened to everything in silence, looking at the little flowering tree in front of me, swaying in the gentle breeze, listening to the birds singing, feeling the warm sun on my face. And when he finished, I waited a few seconds before responding. Ricardo, I accept your apology. I believe you are genuinely sorry now that you are suffering the consequences of your actions, but you need to understand a few things. First, I don't hate you. Hatred requires energy and emotion that I simply no longer feel for you. What I feel is indifference. You have become a stranger to me. Second, your regret came too late to change anything between us. What existed has died, and there is no resurrection possible. Third, I am no longer the Elena you knew. That woman who needed your approval, who depended on you to feel complete, who accepted crumbs of affection and thought it was enough, she no longer exists. The woman I am today is strong, independent, happy alone, and I don't need you for anything at all. Fourth, the pain you caused me transformed me into someone better. I forgive you, Ricardo, not for your sake, but for mine, because holding a grudge would only poison me, and I choose peace. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean friendship. It just means I no longer carry anger. Our paths have definitively separated, and each one follows their own life. When I die, you will be notified because you are the father of my child, but don't expect more than that. When you need something, look for other people. When you have news, good or bad, you don't need to tell me. It's over, Ricardo. Really, completely, definitely over. I wish you find peace and learn from your mistakes. Now I need to go. Bye. And I hung up. My hands didn't shake. My heart beat at a normal rate. There were no tears. There was no renewed pain. There was just confirmation that I was healed, not completely because some scars are permanent, but healed enough to not be shaken by him. I finished my coffee, opened the book again, and delved into Garcia Marquez's words about love and loneliness. And I realized that I understood those words in a way I hadn't before, with the depth that only comes from having lived and survived. That afternoon, I went to the movies with Gloria and Beth to watch a silly romantic comedy that made us laugh out loud and eat buttery popcorn without guilt. In the evening, I ate a light salad that I prepared while listening to Cuban music and dancing alone in the small kitchen of my apartment, dancing with a freedom and joy that I hadn't had since I was in my 20s. Before going to sleep, I looked in the bathroom mirror and smiled at my reflection, at the gray hair that I now let grow naturally because it was beautiful and authentic, at the wrinkles around my eyes that told stories of laughter and tears, at the 61-year-old body that wasn't perfect but was strong and healthy and mine. You did it, I said out loud to myself. You survived and flourished. Congratulations, Elena. 2 full years since that rainy Wednesday in Ricardo's office. I'm sitting on the balcony of my apartment on a Sunday morning. Cloudless blue sky, pleasant temperature of 24 degrees, gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. I am now 61 years old, short gray hair in a modern cut that makes me look paradoxically younger, weight stable at 63 kilos, which is healthy for my height of 1 meter and 62, perfect blood pressure of 115/75, controlled cholesterol, excellent health according to my last complete checkup 3 weeks ago. I work 30 hours a week at the veterinary clinic now, because Dr. Miller promoted me to office manager with a salary of $2,100 a month. I have $670,000 invested, yielding $2,400 a month. I receive $3,500 in pension. My total monthly income is $8,000, which allows me to live very comfortably, travel occasionally, help Miguel financially when he needs it, and also save $500 or $600 a month. I traveled to Colombia last year to visit cousins I hadn't seen in 20 years. I spent 3 wonderful weeks in Cartagena and Bogota, reconnecting with my roots. And I'm going to Costa Rica in 2 months with Gloria and Beth for an eco tour. My Spanish, which was rusty, came back fluently, and now I mix English and Spanish naturally, as I did in my childhood. Selling an average of 1 painting a week for prices between $200 and $500, my art has improved so much that a small local gallery showed 5 of my paintings last month and 3 sold. Miguel is engaged to Ashley. They are getting married in 6 months, and they asked me to help plan the wedding. I am loving every minute of this process, choosing flowers and colors and menu with the future daughter-in-law who I already love as a daughter. Ricardo was not invited to the wedding, and Miguel was firm in his decision. He said he doesn't want his father's negativity and selfishness to tarnish the happiest day of his life. And although a small part of me feels sorry for Ricardo missing important moments in his son's life, the bigger part understands and supports him completely. I made 7 true friends in the last year, incredible women between the ages of 55 and 70, all with stories of resilience and new beginnings. We formed a group that gets together every Friday night to have dinner and talk and laugh until our bellies hurt. I went back to studying. I enrolled in online Latin American literature courses at the University of Miami, and I am loving rediscovering the pleasure of learning, of expanding my mind, of having intellectual goals. I lost 30 kilos, not for vanity but for health. I walk 5 kilometers 4 times a week in a beautiful park near my house. I do yoga 3 times a week. I feel stronger and more energized than I did at 5. Hot. I sleep 8 hours a night, deep and restful sleep without anxiety. I wake up naturally at 6:30 every morning, without an alarm clock, feeling rested and grateful for another day. 3 months ago, I met a man. His name is Fernando Rivas. He is 64 years old, a widower for 5 years after 41 years of happy marriage, a retired history teacher, Argentine by birth but living in Miami for 30 years, honey-colored eyes and a gentle smile that lights up his entire face. I met him at a lecture on Latin American history at the library. We later talked for 45 minutes about Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Jorge Luis Borges. He asked for my number, called 2 days later, and invited me for coffee. We had coffee that turned into lunch, that turned into a walk in the park, that turned into a 4-hour conversation where I told my whole story, and he listened without judgment, just with empathy and admiration. And he told me about the beloved wife he lost to cancer, and the hole that took 5 years to start healing. And when we said goodbye that day, I felt a connection that I hadn't felt in decades, or maybe never truly felt. We've gone out 12 times in the last 3 months. Simple but delicious dinners, walks on the beach at sunset, an art museum, a classical music concert, a tango night where he taught me the basic steps with infinite patience. And each date is light and natural, without pressure or unrealistic expectations. He treats me as an equal, respects my opinions, values my independence, makes a point of sharing bills because he understands that I don't want to be supported or controlled financially by anyone ever again, makes me laugh with absurd stories from his history classes and trips to South America, genuinely listens when I talk about my paintings or my fears or my dreams. I don't know if it will turn into love, if it will turn into a serious relationship, if it will last, but I know that it is healthy and reciprocal and honest, and that is infinitely more than what I had with Ricardo. The story of my failed marriage still occasionally visits me at unexpected moments. A song on the radio that reminds me of when we were young and happy, or at least I thought we were happy. An old photograph that falls out of a book. The wedding anniversary that no longer exists passing by on the calendar unnoticed. In these moments I feel melancholy, not exactly missing Ricardo, but missing the life I thought I would have, the dreams that didn't come true, the intact nuclear family I imagined we would have in old age. But this melancholy passes quickly now. It no longer paralyzes me. It no longer drowns me. I learned that I can feel sadness over loss without wanting to go back to the way things were. I can regret wasted time without regretting the journey that brought me here. I can recognize that I was wronged without carrying victimization as an identity. I'm a survivor, I'm resilient, I'm strong, but I'm also human, with scars that sometimes still burn, and that's okay. Perfection is not the goal. Authenticity is. I sometimes think about the women who are where I was 2 years ago, paralyzed with pain on a kitchen floor, holding pieces of a destroyed life, thinking that there is no way out, that there is no future, that the pain will last forever. I want to tell them with all the strength of my heart that there is a way out, that there is life after betrayal, that there is the possibility of genuine happiness again, even when it seems absolutely impossible. The path is not straight or easy. There are days of crying even after months or years. There are moments of anger that you thought you had overcome. There are nights of loneliness that cut deep. There are scars that never completely disappear. But there are also sunny mornings where you wake up and realize that you didn't think about him even once yesterday. There are moments of laughter so genuine that you forget about being broken. There are small achievements that make you feel capable and valuable. There are new friendships that fill spaces you didn't even know were empty. There are new versions of yourself waiting to be discovered. You don't go back to who you were before because that person was transformed by pain, but you become someone new, someone deeper, someone who knows what darkness is and chose light anyway. And this new person, forged in fire and tears and struggle, this person is beautiful and strong and worthy of all the love and respect in the world. This is my story. It didn't end with a fairy tale ending where I met Prince Charming and lived happily ever after, because real life doesn't work like that. It ended with something more valuable. I found myself. I found my strength. I found my voice. I found my dignity. I learned that self-love is more important than romantic love. I learned that chosen solitude is better than toxic company. I learned that it's never too late to start over, to reinvent, to be reborn. I learned that betrayal says more about the character of the person who betrays than about the value of what is betrayed. I learned that I can survive what I thought would kill me. And I survived, and I blossomed. And here I am, at 61, sitting on the balcony of my little apartment that I bought with my own money, drinking coffee that I chose because I like the strong, bitter taste, wearing clothes that I bought because they make me happy, surrounded by paintings that I created with my own hands, planning trips that I'm going to take because I want to explore the world, waiting for a visit from my son who loves and respects me, perhaps developing a new romance with a man who treats me kindly. And I can say with absolute certainty, I'm fine. I'm more than fine. I'm free. I'm whole. I'm at peace. And that, after everything I've been through, is nothing short of a miracle. If this story touched you, leave your comment saying where you are watching it from and share it with someone who needs to know that it is possible to start over. Like if you believe that no woman deserves to be treated as disposable. And remember, as long as you breathe, you have the power to change your story. I changed mine. You can too. The betrayal that I thought would destroy me ended up setting me free. The man I thought was mine forever turned out to be just a painful but necessary chapter. And the life I thought was over at 59 is just beginning. To all the women who are hurting right now, who think they won't survive the pain, who have lost hope, I am living proof that you will survive, you will recover, and you will discover a version of yourself that is stronger and freer than you ever thought possible. Don't give up. Fight. You deserve justice. You deserve dignity. You deserve self-love. You deserve to start over. And you will achieve it. I achieved. You can do it too. Always.